So we've just completed demo in the old Slate Hill Meeting House. This is the front vestibule. Up here, you might be able to see, that's the old clapboard siding from the original exterior of the church before the vestibule was added. And for structural purposes, we had to pull up the original 1830s floor and just stack it in the addition in the back, and then we will relay it. But there were a lot of structural problems with the supports holding up all these beams. So they were removed, and we will, once we address everything structurally per the engineer's plans, which have not been finalized yet, they're coming out tomorrow to do that, we're going to relay the original 1830s floor. We got approval from Historic to do the 1830s finishes. We have our beautiful beams and roof rafters exposed, which I'm very excited about. It's about 14 feet from the finished floor up to the beams that are connected to the roof rafters, and then probably another 7 feet or so to the peak. But this is pretty cool to see because our main beam here, everything is done, you know, back in the 1830s with all this really cool notch work, which allows for a little more shifting and movement, and was just kind of how they built things back then. And you can see some of these beams have some pretty bad damage, which is why we needed to rip everything up and really address it. And these beams got shored up, but with footers that are not to code. So it's a lot of structural work. Nothing my general contractor can't handle. Unfortunately, it's really dark in here because we also pulled out the windows. They were not in good shape, not usable. The ones in the main sanctuary were rotting and had to be replaced, and the ones back here were just old and leaky, and we really needed new ones. So this is our addition. This is what I'm walking through currently, the 1950s section of the addition. And then back here, this is the 1970s social hall. And we've got all of our beautiful original 1830s hardwood floor pieces. And these are of varying widths. Some of them are really wide, like 10-inch planks like this. Some of them are more like 7 or 8. And then there are a few that are these thinner, like more like 4-inch. And that was just how they built this. Rumor has it that this building was the original 200-year-old part of the sanctuary, was financed, and probably a lot of the wood was cut down from Morven Plantation, which is right next door to us. It's currently owned by the UVA Morven Preservation Foundation. So yeah, so we've got a lot of stuff going on in here to address some structural things, but it's gonna be beautiful. This is kind of the messy part. Ooh, some of these are moving as I walk. Yeah, so this is definitely the messy part, but you can see all the beautiful beadboard walls go all the way up to the ceiling. And we know that the pulpit wasn't original, it was added later. You can see these 2 holes here in the back above the doorways. We think those were originally windows. So those 2 holes right there were cut out for HVAC returns, but immediately to the right of it, you can kind of see a box cutout that was very clearly filled in at a later time, and the tongue and groove just does not line up right there. It's very obvious it was a square. And then we have a symmetrical one on the other side right above the doorway. And I believe in the rear of the sanctuary, based on this architecture, those were probably windows once upon a time, very similar to what we see along the sides of the sanctuary. There may not have been any back doors, and these back doors were probably added in the 1950s when they built this first addition, I think around 1956 or so. So that was really interesting to discover and see what was happening. Again, probably in the 50s, they replaced the foundation with concrete blocks. But when this would have been built in the 1830s, they just used the stack stone, the shale, and the slate that is prevalent and all over this site to build everything up. And you can see here, over the years, they shored stuff up with a tree stump, which is a termite highway. That's asking for trouble. So that's part of the reason why we had to open this all up and fix it, is while some of these things might structurally be okay, they are problematic, not to code. And if you're going to do a historic preservation and restoration, the whole point is really going to be to make sure this building stands for another 100 or 200 years. It would be a shame to not address the foundation issues and not do it properly. You can see over there the concrete block that was probably put in again around the 50s. And then we've also got some holes up here, symmetrical. There's one on this side. And if we turn around, there's one on the other side. That's where I found out from previous church members, from the deacon, that they originally had wood burning stoves. So they would have had one on either side for heat in the winter. Yeah. So really interesting to see how they built things so long ago. And one of the other tricky things about repairing this foundation, these rafters that go across, they're flat on the top and curved on the bottom. They literally just shucked the bark off the tree. Did not, you can see they did not flatten it at all, and it is curved. So all of these beams here that run across, that go from side to side, don't have flat bottoms. This central one in the middle appears to be flat-ish across the bottom, but all these cross beams are not. They are all rounded on the bottom because they did not, it was the 1830s, they were cutting down these trees by hand. They did not bother to flatten the underside because it didn't need these other additional supports we have here and on the other side. They only had needed that central support, which they are notched into, and the supports on the side. So they did not bother to flatten the bottom. So that makes that a little difficult to address, but there's a pretty good chance that we're just gonna have to shore up some things on the edge, in the middle, and I am not sure exactly what we're gonna do with these supports, this support here. It's kind of between the middle and the side, about a quarter of the way, the width. That's for the structural engineer to decide the best way to handle that. Do we need it? Those kinds of things. We've also gotten rid of our very ugly chain link fence because no one needs a chain link fence. And I'm gonna refinish these posts. It didn't make sense to remove them the whole way around, and probably just kind of loop some rope between these to kind of just show the cemetery boundary, but not have a formal fence anymore. And I'll have to refurbish the gates or replace the gates. We're still figuring that out, to keep the cemetery all nice. We're gonna rip up this circle driveway. We'll keep the paved section that kind of goes up the little hill as you come in. And there's a lot of work to be done in the cemetery, but I think I have to worry about that after we get through construction, because construction is a beast unto itself. There'll be a little handicap ramp right there we're gonna build for our ADA suite, so they have direct ingress and egress. They'll also be able to access it from the hallway. the garage will get a roof because the current roof is really old. And then I came out here last week with my kiddo and we built, mostly he watched and handed me screws and drill bits, a nice little compost bin to get going composting stuff, because we're gonna have a lot of garden area that needs to be worked on, and we're gonna have our new construction house over there. We got to remove that really ugly old TV antenna, so that'll be that. Yeah, so there'll be a very nice garden over in this area. This is going to be very much a compost garden storage area. Over here we're going to have a small addition to enlarge the commercial kitchen, because if you're cooking 20 people breakfast every day, you really need a decent sized kitchen, and there just wasn't enough square footage to fit 5 bedrooms, 5 baths, half baths at a commercial kitchen. We needed just an extra, like, maybe 100 square feet. It's not a lot. So they're working on that here. We also had an oil tank that had to get removed. There were actually 2 oil tanks. One had oil in it. We got that disposed of properly per environmental regulations. An oil company came and got rid of it, and then the tank disposed of. And then we've got a second tank that is super deep, that it's already got filled with cement, probably sometime between the 1950s and 70s. We do not know exactly when. That is just because it's essentially a metal box filled with concrete and it hasn't had oil in it for, you know, at least 50 years, probably more like 80. We're probably just gonna leave it in place instead of dig it out, because they were able to test and confirm there's nothing in there. It's been filled with cement. Nowadays, people do not fill oil tanks with cement. They use sand or foam or other things that are recommended. But for some reason, back in the day, the church members were like, yeah, we don't use this oil tank anymore. We'll leave it in place and fill it with cement, which makes it pretty much impossible to remove without an exorbitant cost. Yeah, so hopefully we'll be starting the roof soon. We're coming back with a gray metal roof, very similar to what's there per historic's specifications, and then an asphalt roof on the addition.